Welcome to the Dive Table. I'm Jay Gardner.
And I'm Sarah Miller, and today we're going to be talking about boat etiquette. Jay, do you want to?
I'm on a boat. I'm on
Yeah,
a boat.
on a boat.
What's that sound?
It's a classic from whatever time frame. What inspired this one? Because this is a topic that you wanted to push here.
Yeah, so it's so interesting. The boat topic. Because there's lots of different situations you can find yourself on in boat diving. Everything from a chartered boat, some people call them the cattle boats, just packed full of divers, to a smaller charter, to a Zodiac, to a buddy or friend's boat, which is the best one, by the way. And what is the etiquette? There's a etiquette that comes with being on a boat to make it easy to dive. And we always think about the saying, we train hard to dive easy. And yet in a lot of your open water courses or those sorts of things, at least in mine, I had no idea I was a certified diver. I had 30, 40 dives and I never dove off a boat. I got in a boat and it was like a whole different world. So for me, when I teach open water, I purposely do a couple of days shore diving and a day of kind of experience diving off of a boat, but we're still in instruction mode because there's things that you should know and things that were taught to me eventually that were really helpful for me on a boat. So I'm passionate about that sounds so stupid, about the etiquette of boat diving, but
it's not stupid.
It's passion.
No, yeah. I like it. So let's get into it. So I'm really curious to hear more about this because I got certified on a boat. So like my experience from the get-go was boat diving. And I guess the learnings kind of came from just being there, right? Like I never had an instructor sit down. I mean, obviously there was like the safety briefings and that kind of stuff, but like I didn't get a real lesson of like the different parts of the boat and like the lingo. I mean, for goodness sakes, I have called a bowline a bowline for like most of my marine career. And it's common. And I realize that I have a lot of mispronunciations because I learned all of this stuff with Spanish speakers and people who speak English as a second language. So like I was in this different world and I didn't know. And the first time that I said that to like a sailor, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. They called me out on it. Like, what is that? Like, I am special. So please, let's hear from you on this.
Don't worry. I just called challah bread. So I got a nice response from that one, which I just didn't know. My bad. But yeah, I think your experience is like most people's experience. So what I did is I prepped for this episode a list of the things that I talk about, my kind of list that I take on a boat with me when I'm teaching open water students, or I'm teaching somebody that maybe has never been boat diving before, the things that I would go through. So maybe we could go through the list and go back and forth on that.
Yeah.
Sound good? All right. So number one on my list is be a minimalist. You don't want to be the person. A boat, by the very nature of it being a boat, has limited space, right? For the most part, almost every boat I've ever been on, even if it's not packed, even if it's not, a cattle boat, you have a limited amount of space. And so you don't want to bring everything that you own in your dive locker onto that boat, right?
Yeah.
You don't need your backup fins and your backup fins just in case. Be a minimalist. Bring what you need for that trip, that dive, and leave everything else at home or in the car or in the parking lot or in the dive locker at the dive shop. And I think that this is an important one because oftentimes I get on a boat and you see someone who's, we kind of joke, and the phrase has always been the Christmas tree diver, the one that has a bunch of ornaments hanging off of them. Bring everything that they possibly could ever need for every dive. We're doing a nice, reef dive, and they've got, a reel and 3 spools clipped off. Why? Right? Like you're not going to use those things. So the number one rule, or the first rule, not the number one, is be a minimalist, because recognize that the boat has very little space and you want to take up as little of that space as possible for your stuff.
Yeah, I think on top of that is, and I say this being a person that is terrible at this, be like organized. Like my biggest issue with going on to random boats at this point is that I currently do not have a gear bag. Like I don't have one. It does not live in my vehicle because I don't go on boats very often anymore. Like it's just
Right.
not a common thing. I'm always shore diving from my van. So I would say that, if you are going to do that, having a bag or a crate, right? Like a lot of people will take a crate, and especially if you know the boat that you're going to go on, you could get one that fits under the dive benches. That's really helpful.
Right. Yeah, that's number 2 on the list, is be tidy and
Hey,
compact. See?
nailed it.
Be tidy, be compact. What else can you do to do that? Like I love the idea of the crate. You can also, depending on the situation, get ready at the truck or at the dive shop. I put on my dry suit halfway, so I put half of it on, and without the arms or the neck seal or anything like that, at my truck before I ever get onto the boat, right? Because that saves a bunch of space of me changing and things being everywhere and all of that. Leave behind big cases. The cases that you have your dive gear sitting in, like trade it for a small crate or something like that. There's a lot that you can leave in the car or get
Yeah.
ready at the car before you ever step foot on the dock to get in the boat. And then on top of that, I think it's being tidy and being compact also means, like for example, I'll have to post a picture of this, but I dive a lot of doubles when I'm boat diving, or I'll have my CCR boat diving, which is a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of things. And so the way I've learned to kind of keep all of that really nice and tidy, the long hose, all of that, is to kind of keep it all together, put the belt together, take the crotch strap, put it all the way over the top and over the manifold, and tuck everything into that, wrap the long hose around that. So that's one tidy piece. There's nothing dangling that someone could walk by and trip on, or get wrapped around somebody else's tank or anything like that. And I bring my gear onto the boat, put it there, get it nice and tidy. When we're first taking off, after the dive, when they're going to do fills or anything like that, I put it back in that same tidy place. Every time that my gear is going to sit there without it on me, I tidy it up, I clean it up, and I clean up the area around me, put my fins in the same spot. For example, again, these are little tips and tricks. I put my mask in one boot of my fin, and my computer and my compass in the other boot of the fin, and slide those underneath, and sometimes I'll put my hood through the not elastic, the metal spring straps, to keep everything really tidy. Just pick up my fins, everything's there, my kit's nice and clean, and I'm compact and tidy, and not taking up any more space than what I need for myself.
Yeah, I would say that last tip, if you do that, make sure that you are like remembering that you did that, because I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen people accidentally toss their computer overboard because they've forgotten that.
Oh,
Yeah. That's why I tend to attach computers and compasses and things to my BCD. Like I just attach things there. Sure, it looks like a Christmas tree for a minute, but like then I know that it's attached. But that is that's a good piece of advice for people. I think you kind of like when you look around and you watch the people who are working on the boat, you notice that that is very much their mentality as well, right? Like anything that they're doing, they're cleaning up after themselves. You don't see the lines, all over the place. It's all very neat and tidy. So I think it's good to sort of emulate that.
yeah. Again, limited space, lots of people moving in heavy gear, is just be as clean as you can, and I think that's an important one. I also I put my computer and compass on bungees, so they're on, that's how they go onto my wrist.
Mm.
You can take that and clip it into the long hose bolt snap,
Yeah.
is another way if you want to do that. Same thing, I think what Sarah's saying, clipping it to the back plate or the wing. I do that with my CCR because I can't remove that computer, right? It's attached to the unit.
Yeah.
So again, it's just being mindful, however you do it. And the other thing about that is, I think as Sarah pointed out, get into a routine. I know my boot of my fins has my mask, has my compass, has my
Yeah.
depth gauge. Get into a routine of think through how you're going to do the boat, and then ask yourself after that trip, how did it go? How could I improve that? How could I be a little tidier, a little more prepared? Is a really nice way to be prepared for boat diving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got number 1 and number 2. Here's number 3 on my list. Be prepared. What does that mean?
Be
Call
like a Boy
ahead.
Scout, Girl Scout.
Yes. On my honor, I'll do my duty. Right? To be prepared. So for all you tech divers out there, this goes directly to you. Call ahead if you're bringing your doubles. Call ahead if you're bringing stages or deco bottles, all of those sorts of things.
That goes for side mount too, because there are some boats that do not want side mount on their boat. Like, exactly. Period.
Yeah. Where do you want me to put, hey, I'm bringing doubles. Is there room on the boat for that? Number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, where do you want me? What makes it easier for you? Where do you want this deco bottle? Where do you want this stage bottle? Ask that question before you ever show up the morning of the dive. And it's a simple phone call. I mean, I'll do it. I'll even leave a message. Like, I literally went boat diving a couple weeks ago and I called. No one picked up. I left a message, said, hey, this is Jay Gardner. I'm going to be diving doubles. Please give me a call back if that won't work. Or if you don't have space for that. And they called me back and said, bring them. We want you in this specific spot. So we'll save it for you. Thanks. Done. Took 30 seconds. So be prepared. It also comes down to things like things that are on the vessel. So do they have a Save a Dive kit that's on the vessel? Most vessels do. So in that case, you don't need to bring all of your toolbox worth of gear. Are they going to fill gases? If they are going to fill gases, do they have an analyzer on the vessel? If not, you can bring an analyzer, Palm O2 or whatever. If they have one, leave yours at home. Leave it in the truck. So it's just being prepared of what do I actually need to bring, and preparing the dive operator for the way that you want to dive or what you want to do, so that everybody feels better about that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add to that. Yeah.
Be a Boy Scout. Be prepared. Yeah. All right. Number 4. The number 4 on my list is just the word drama.
Yeah, for anybody that gets seasick knows that. Yeah, Dramamine.
Do you get seasick?
I have gotten seasick, but it's not it's usually not a horrific experience. I found that when I owned the boat in Indonesia, like, as long as I didn't eat a big breakfast before heading out, I'd be fine. The only time that I've gotten properly seasick was, I think it was my first time out to the islands in California, and I don't know what happened, but I was seasick for like a day and a half. Like, oof. I tried to go to yoga the following morning, and I was doing sun salutations, and I finally had to like sit down because I just had like massive vertigo. Like, I felt terrible. So it's like no joke. With that stuff, you want to take it the night before usually and the morning of, just to like get it in your system. And then you're usually going to have a good time. Usually you don't want to wait and be like stoic and be like, this time is going to be different. And then like take it when you're already feeling sick, because then it's way too late.
Yeah. Listen to Sarah's words right there. Rewind the podcast and listen to that again, because it's so true. And I had never been seasick really. But I still, got into the routine of the Dramamine. And then there was one time that I didn't do the Dramamine, and sure enough, I'd eaten a big lunch and we went out for a dive, and oh my gosh, it was the worst feeling in the world.
Did you barf?
I didn't. I've never barfed yet. I was so close. And the best I've heard it called so far, because every dive operator kind of has their own way of talking about barfing on a boat. They always do it in a dive briefing, and they have a special spot to go to. The best I've ever heard it titled was the VIP section, which is the
Cute.
vomiting in progress section.
Cute.
Which comes with another little tip and trick that is a lesson learned through experience. Don't put your kit next to the VIP system or VIP section.
Oh no.
Yeah. I was sitting there, and it was a nice spot because it was like an open, spot. I like to be on the deck, not underneath the top deck on the boats, and sure enough, someone had to visit the section, and I was there. I moved, but I didn't move my kit fast enough, and
the wind.
There it was. Yeah. It was gross. So if you've ever had to scrape that off of regulators, it's not a fun thing. So,
well, I think most, if scuba instructors are listening to this, I think all of us have gotten experience of someone barfing on us. So it's just part of the fun of the job, I guess, is dealing with people's vomit.
There's our next shirt. What was the first one? We're having a good time on the internet. Having a lovely time on the internet. This one should be, you're not really a scuba instructor until you've been barfed on.
It's real. It's real for sure.
It is. All right. So VIP section covered. I think one of the other things that maybe should go without saying, but surprisingly doesn't, is if you're going to bring a dry bag, which is a great thing to do, to be able to put your phone and things that you want to keep dry, or I have a Ziploc bag. Sometimes I just bring that and it's fine. But try to keep the dry areas dry. And I see, whether it's in an area of the boat, in the front of the boat, or it's its own container that says dry container. I see so many times people grabbing their dry bag that they left and it's soaked, and then putting the dry bag into the dry container that's all wet, and everyone's stuff gets wet. So try to keep dry areas dry if you can.
Yeah, I think that's just part of like the respect of sharing space with people, whenever you have a common area, and especially with a space that small, like listen to the boat briefing, follow the rules that are on the boat,
Yeah. That's actually, you're right ahead of me on my list here.
Oh,
I'm
man.
impressed. Because communication was the next one.
I guess I have done some boat diving, so there you go.
You do have a list.
Yeah, communication. You said communication is the next one?
Yeah, with the operator. Communicating with the operator.
That's what I always see in this. You might be wanting to touch on, pre-dive, like you've already said, but the biggest thing for me is to make sure that you understand how they're keeping track of you, and to be very clear about that. So like a lot of boats that are bigger will assign you a number, and make sure that you tell them, okay, 32 is leaving, 32 is back on board, being very clear about that. And then also for like dive operations where you're going as a buddy team, you get a back on board time, right? Like, and it's part of the logistics and scheduling of that day. So like, again, being respectful of that and making sure that you follow the guidance and rules that they set. They're there for a reason.
Yeah. And I find it's exactly right. Communicating goes both ways. So number one, listening to the captain and the crew. And I find, unfortunately, a lot of people on boats sometimes tune out to the safety brief. Maybe they've been on the boat a bunch of times, and so they're just kind of continuing on the conversation, or doing their own thing. And I'll tell you, even if you've been on that boat 100 times and you know it inside and out, or you even own the boat, the safety brief isn't just for you; it's for all of the divers. And so, being respectful, tuning in that 3 minutes it takes to listen, I think is an important thing. And then on top of that, also the dive brief, those dive masters or instructors, whoever's on the boat, part of the crew that's talking about that dive site, even if you've been on it 100 times, again, remember, it's not just for you. Someone else on the boat, it's probably their first time on that. So if you're being disruptive during that time or dismissive of what's happening, that makes not only it harder for the dive operator to do their job, but it also can create a culture where that's okay to be dismissed, where something, someone who's diving it for the first time really needs to hear that. So make sure that you're listening to those things and you're tuning in when they're being done. And I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, I think that second part that you were mentioning, like it's about being examples, right? Like if you've been on that boat 100 times, like we need to be examples for the people who are new, and spreading that sense that like we respect one another, right? Like it's a really basic thing, but it can be ignored.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also think like you said, the timing of things is important, but you can, this goes out to all those instructors out there as well. When you're working off of a boat, is having that dialogue. Hey, we're going to be shooting some SMBs up because we're doing some SMB drills. Or, hey, we're going to go right here and we're working on X, Y, and Z. Just giving them that knowledge, letting them know what's going on. Or, hey, we might run a little bit over because of this. Is that okay? Right? That's a conversation, not okay, they said what they need to say, now let me get to work, right? It's more about that dialogue, the open dialogue. And hey, if you're doing a bigger dive, or there was a guy recently who was on his CCR, and we got a dive time of, I think it was an hour, be back on the boat, and then we'll take a surface interval and we'll do another hour on the same site. This guy just stayed underneath the whole time,
right,
and didn't communicate
to
the captain. That's what
yikes.
he's going to do.
Okay.
And so there was a little bit of this, like, and I said, hey, I did see him. He's on the CCR. My assumption would be he's just going to stay for the 2 hours, but he didn't communicate that to me. But that would be my assumption. And so the captain asked, hey, will you go and just take a peek and make sure he's there? I said, sure. And he was, and he got a little scolding when he got back on the boat a little later.
Good.
But that's just a misstep in communication, not in the execution of the dive. That's fine. If you want to stay for 2 hours, we have that time.
Totally, but you have to tell somebody about it.
Got to communicate, right? You got to communicate. So communication's so important. Don't feel like it's you're the tourist and you can't speak to the captain or the crew. If you need to say something, you want to communicate to them, ask them, hey, I really need to talk to you. When you find a good time, can you jump over here so I could ask you a couple questions? Because they might be dealing with the lines, getting the boat launched, whatever it would be. And right then is not the right time to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But just let them know, hey, I'd like a few minutes before that. I always get on the boat and I ask, the captain and the crew, hey, can you let me know when we're about 15 minutes from the site? Because I'd like for us to get ready. Because my goal on a boat is always either to be the first ones in the water or to be the last, one or the other. I don't like being in the middle of things. That's when the line gets really clogged up. That's when, keeping the team together can become challenging if you have issues when you get in the water, all of that. So I always say, let's get in first or let's get in last. And that means we need a good 15 minutes, get all of our gear, on, checks done, all of that. And so that as soon as we moor onto that dive site, boom, let's go. We're ready. Let's get to the back of the boat. Let's go. Or someone's taking a long time. Don't rush. It's fine. Let everybody else go. Right? Someone's having an issue. Oh, my right post, whatever's going on, this, that, the other thing, or I had a leak in this and I'm fixing it. No worries. Don't rush yourself. Take your time. We'll go last. So you give yourself that leeway is how I approach it.
Cool.
All right. I only have 2 more on my list.
Oh, man.
I love boat diving. I love all diving, but I like the boat because I always feel like you not only get to go diving, but you get to, like a little cruise in there as well.
Well, yeah.
So I always end up like, leaving my gear when the dive's all done, going up to the top deck and just sitting there and enjoying the conversation and enjoying the view and all that. I think it's a cool
full day
adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most of us are obsessed with boats. Like, I mean, I haven't talked about it on the podcast, but I'm currently shopping for a sailboat, you know, like it's
Ooh.
I think we're all kind of obsessed with them. And usually you want to be the friend of a friend who owns a boat. You
Yes.
don't want to actually own the boat, but I'm going to do the stupid thing and try and own the boat. So
Now, Sarah, since we're talking about this on the podcast, I told Sarah I've owned a boat, and I said, "Don't do it." I said,
hey,
"Be a friend with somebody that wants to do it."
I have owned a 60-foot boat. I know how much of a like black hole of money they are.
Yes,
But
they are.
I'm also curious to do it. I've never had a sailboat. My boat in Indonesia was motored by a giant freaking mega diesel engine.
Yeah.
So it would be a different adventure, and boat life and van life are very similar in a lot of ways. I'd actually get more space on a sailboat, which would be crazy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. All right, 2 more on my list here. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to. I called this one "Don't be a back deck driver." I don't know. That was I got to come up with a better phrase for this one. So
I mean,
if you have
I
ideas
like
out there,
it. I like it, but I explain yourself.
explain myself. Originally, it was "Don't be a poop deck driver." Do you know what the poop deck is on the boat?
I thought that was like a joke. That's not like
No, it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
okay.
The poop deck is the deck above the captain's quarters on old pirate style ships like galleons. They called
Okay.
that the poop deck. It's not where you go poop, but they called it the poop deck. And
Yeah.
I forget the whole reason why. Anyway, so I don't know. The other one was, and I felt like this was a little bit sexist, but like don't be a boat Karen. Was another one. Like there's a few others. I don't know what the male version of Karen is, but it exists out there.
Chad.
Chad, there you go. In other words,
Although Chad it's a different connotation, but
I'll explain it, and then we got to come up with a better phrase for it. But it's when you're on the boat, it's not the time to criticize other people's kits, gear, way of diving, all of that. Be judgmental. It's not the time, right? It's not the time to teach them, well, you should put it this way and you should do it that way. No, let's just unscrew this regulator and put it over here, and we'll put this one over here because that'll be a lot better for you. And it's not the time to give your advice about someone else's diving. The reason I say all of that is, yes, you might have an opinion. Yes, the caveat to all this is, if you see something completely unsafe, hey, your regulator is actually not on your tank and you're about to jump in the water, yes, say something, right? Like, or hey, like it's leaking. Like, obviously, if there are major safety concerns, if you see something, say something. If you see someone, out of it, say something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't be the boat Chad or Karen that goes around and with the clipboard and like, oh, well, you're using a bungee wing. Do you know why those are so unsafe? Blah, 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 blah. You should cut that bungee off. I've seen it so many times on a boat. And especially I'm talking to you tech divers and sometimes you DIR divers that are out there, making other people feel uncomfortable. The boat is not the time. If you really have to say something, wait for the parking lot after it. Wait for the lunch afterwards. I just have found, shut up, do your dive as you're doing. If someone has a question, I'll happily give a short answer and say, hey, why don't we talk more about it when we get back to port? Or why don't we grab coffee this week and I'd love to talk more about it. The boat is just not the place to have those conversations, to be in that situation. And I see it way too often. And it's something that if I, maybe I should make another shirt that just says like, don't be a boat Karen, and wear that on the boat, because I just think it's an unfortunate thing. People are there. They paid the same amount of money as you did to be on that boat. They have the right to dive in the way that they want to dive, without, feeling judged and feeling like they don't belong. And that's just a big thing for me.
Yeah, and I want to push back on just some of that the attitude that you're referring to, like, because I see it a lot with certain types of divers, and honestly, this message isn't going to hit them anyway because they don't care. Their way of doing things is the best way of doing things. But whenever I see something and I'm like, huh, like that's an interesting way of configuring things or whatever, like how about you get curious about it? Like, oh, that's interesting. Like why do you do it that way? And like maybe you'll learn something. Like, it can go into your bank of things that, maybe it's reasons why you don't do it that way, but you can like learn from these other divers, whether they have, 10 dives or 500 or whatever. Like, I I don't know. I think a lot of us will get into a space of just being like, well, this is the way that I think everybody should dive, or like, this is the equipment that I think everybody should have. And like, and I'm saying this to, backplate and wing long hose guy. Um, I just don't. I think being curious is the better way to go about things, and if people want to hear your opinion, they'll ask you, right? Like, because of the nature of like what I do on the internet, I do get a lot of people who ask like, "What do you think about this?" and "How would you do it?" Like that kind of conversation is fine. But I think it's like a mindset thing of not being so stuck on what we think is right and just being curious about each other, you know?
Yeah, I think curiosity is different than maybe what I'm describing, because I agree. I think you'll see a lot of things and you can ask those questions. I think it's making sure that it's coming from a place of curiosity and not judgment.
Yeah.
And that's the line for me. And what I see on the boats a lot is the judgment. You might use a question to get into, let me tell you how you should do this differently. Um, and I think that's the attitude I'm addressing is more or less the I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Hey, and this is coming from somebody who owns an agency that has a very specific way that
Yep.
we configure it. That does not mean that everybody is part of your tribe, and it needs to be a part of your tribe. And everybody who does it differently is wrong. It means that you've made a choice in the way that you want to dive, and your choice has reasons, and that's great. But it doesn't mean that you have to evangelize
Yeah.
that to everybody else and convert everybody. You can if they ask, that's my saying. Shut up, dive, and if people ask, answer genuinely, and if they're really interested, have a conversation at the parking lot, because the boat's really not the spot for it. So that maybe we
Right
have to come
on.
up with a better phrase for that, but I don't know. Don't be a back deck driver, a buddy driver. I don't know. If you got one
I
out
thought you
there in the
were
scuba verse,
yeah, I thought you were referring to like other boaters trying to direct the captain. I'm like, "Bro,
yeah,
not the
no, don't do
place.
that.
This is not your
Don't do
boat.
that.
Like stand down."
Exactly. Yeah. Please. I didn't put that on my list, but please don't give instructions to the crew of how they should run their boat.
Absolutely not.
That's just silly. The last one on my list, and maybe we can wrap up this episode with this, was just be aware of the layout of the boat. So this comes from experience as well. It doesn't mean you need to know what, the bow and the stern and what port and starboard, and you don't need to get on the boat and immediately become a pirate and speak pirate to be successful. But know where the head is or the bathroom is on the boat, right? Know where the food is and where the trash cans are. So when you need to throw something away, you can. Know, hey guys out there, if you dive a dry suit and you have your P valve hooked up, know where it's appropriate to maybe between dives or before dive to, if you need to go without taking all that apart. Don't just go on the deck where everyone's gear is. Like, this is
That's
so
so
gross to me.
gross. I cannot believe that like has that literally happened?
Yes. And it's gross.
Gross.
It's really
Like
gross.
you're in the water for diving. Like just pee in the water like a normal
Yeah,
human
I know.
being.
I know. It's so
Ugh.
gross. But
God.
some boats have a warm shower. If you're if you're lucky, one of the boats here in San Diego has a warm shower. It's right in the middle of the deck. So if you're standing there in your undergarments and someone decides to take a shower, guess what? Your undergarments are now wet. So be aware of where you're standing. Be aware of what's going on around you, of where you can be kind of out of the way. Just familiarize yourself with it. I mean, it's not, boats are not crazy things. They point in one direction. There's a front, there's a back, there's a left and there's a right, and there's a way that it's laid out. And so familiarize yourself with it and try to, position yourself in a way that you're out of the way of other people trying to move about and still able to get done what you need to get done.
Yeah, and it's a good idea to always have like a point of contact when you're like walking around the boat, because obviously it is moving in water. So you can easily get knocked or, trip, stumble over your feet. So making sure that you're staying safe and staying on the boat. And then with going back to safety, listening to that safety speech and like understanding where everything is, especially if you're one of the more advanced people on the boat and you would be like an integral part to a rescue or something. Knowing where the EPIRB is, knowing where the O2 is, knowing where the life vests and rings and all of those things like that. I think we've already said that, but like that's really important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then the last one, sorry, on my list was also gear related. So if you're diving from a boat, it's always a good idea to take an SMB. And if you haven't shot an SMB in a really long time, maybe in a shakeout dive before that boat dive, or just review the content from your agency or watch the video online, whatever it might be, to review that. But yeah, if you're going to jump off the back of the boat, I would recommend every team member, everybody has their own SMB, because that way you can notify the boat of where you are in location. And then the other thing I would think from a skills and gear perspective is just be mindful of the downline and the upline. Most of the time when you dive off a boat, unless you're drift diving, the boat is going to be moored onto the wreck or onto the reef or onto something that you're out to go see. And the captain and the crew will likely tell you which line, whether they want you to go off the mooring line or they have a drift line set up or they have whatever they have set up, they want you to descend on. But usually you're going to be descending on a line. Just be mindful of that descent, and that ascent especially can get crowded. When the captain says be back in an hour, and at 15 feet, there's, 30 people hanging on one spot, maybe end your dive a little bit earlier so that you're not part of that, right? If you're planning to do that stop or whatever it would be.
Or if you're comfortable doing your stop away from that line, depending on the current.
I was going to say that, but I felt like I would get in trouble for saying that, because I don't ever touch the line unless I have to, right? Because
there's no reason. Yeah.
Light current, face into the current, and lightly give a light kick forward. You're going to stay in position, right?
Yeah.
It's
sometimes
nice.
You are like a freaking flag and there's no way to stay near the boat unless you're holding on. And that's kind of why it's nice that we have a range, right? We can be between, 3 and 6 meters and do that safety stop. So that gives us some wiggle room.
Feet, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. So, Imperial.
No, that's fine. I'll translate. Just be mindful of that downline and that upline, because it tends to get crowded. It tends, especially if people are going hand over fist down a line. Just wait. Like, don't go directly after the two people that just went in front of you. You and your buddy, give a count to 30 and then go, right? And that just cleans it up for everybody going up and down that line, because that's kind of the main trafficked area of the dive. So I think that was all my, and tipping. I don't know, there's different standards. I don't know what, is right or wrong. I can tell you, for me, what I do, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, so I'm probably gonna get a lot of criticism, but I try to tip like $10 a tank for the crew, considering that usually it's a crew of more than one person. And, I don't know, it's $20 for 2 dives, $30 for, 3 dives. And I try to bring that in cash or in my whole be prepared call ahead. Hey, do your dive masters and crew take tips via Venmo? Do you know? if I don't want to bring cash with me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do.
I think they do. And you can see that sometimes they leave signs around the boat and everything like that. The reason I say tips, you paid a lot of money to go out on the boat. It's true. And, had a good time. But often that crew is, as you will well imagine, is not paid very well, and is somewhat dependent, kind of like how we have it in the States when it comes to food service, on those tips. And so again, just calculate it into what you're paying for the boat, add the tip on top, and so it doesn't feel like an extra, and take care of those folks, for two reasons. One is because they're probably dependent upon it, and two, because you want that operator, if you had a good time, of course, your tip is your choice. If you had a terrible time and all that, you don't have to tip. But if you want that operation to stay in business, then that's a consideration to make, is to bring the tip money and to say thank you, and to be, kind and courteous about the way that they want to run their ship.
Yeah, and I think your numbers sound kind of familiar to people that I've heard in the U.S. how they tip. In other places, it might be like 10% of what the dive day is, 10 or 15. And yeah, I think that's kind of standard with like restaurants too, right? Or I guess restaurants are much higher these days. So, you can be very generous and people will love you for it. You can go 15, 20%. But that's also like, it's a fair amount of money. So yeah, I think giving what you can, I speak as someone who has survived on tips before, that it does make a difference. But I also understand, as someone who needs to travel on a budget, that it's not always, can't always give everything that you want to give. So, using your discretion and making sure that like you're covering and being as generous as you can.
Yeah. And that generosity, I think, like you said, depending on what you can and can't do financially, doesn't just stop at money. It's also, being a good human being to them, telling them thank you and please, having some manners. That goes a long way. And genuinely asking, how are you? How do you like working as a dive master? I've been on all kinds of boats, and you'd be surprised at how many times they don't get asked that question. And then they just talk forever. And you're like, oh,
right.
Awesome. Good to meet you. And you make friends. It's just being a good human being, like everywhere. But realizing, they aren't there just so you have a good time. They're there for them to earn a living. And it's important to keep that in mind. So yeah, cool. I don't think we beat this up. Did we beat it up too bad?
I mean, but I think it's good. And hopefully people got something out of this. And I'm looking forward to having my own things when I'm taking people out on a sailboat to go scuba diving. So
That's right. Yeah. And if you go out on a buddy's boat, chip in for gas money. Come on. Come on now.
Like for everything. Please. Are you kidding? It's so expensive to have a boat. Like, help out.
Yeah, I actually screwed that up the last time I went. I totally forgot, and I have to address that with my buddy who has a boat. But yeah, I please, help out in whatever way you can. And most of all, go boat diving. It's a blast. You'll see things that you can't see from the shore. You get a little cruise. If your boat breaks down, like mine have in the past, you get a nice 3-tank dive, sites, and a sunset cruise until the rescue boat shows up. So
God,
you never know what's going to happen.
No, I have to say, as an operator, like that is the worst. You're like scrambling, trying to figure out how to get your boat back, and like trying to keep people happy, and like, oh my gosh, I do not miss that. I don't miss that part, because boats just break down. It's part of the life. But if people have a good attitude about it, like I remember one time we broke down, it was a women's dive day in the Komodo National Park. So luckily we broke down in a bay, and we just like cranked up some music and had a dance party, and it was a great time. But all of us behind the scenes were running around like, how the fuck are we going to get home?
Bust out the oars.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Anyway. Yeah. That's awesome. Let's all go boat diving this summer. Let's do it.
All right. Awesome. That's it. So Thanks for joining us on this episode. Reach out to us, Jay, Jay, at thedivetable.com, or Sarah with an H at thedivetable.com. And we would love to hear from you and your stories from boat diving. But thanks for joining us on this episode, and we hope to have you back on the next episode of The Dive Table.
Bye.
The Dive Table is a production of Fish Dive Surf Incorporated and a member of the Fish Dive Surf Podcast Network. You can find out more at www.fishdivesurf.com.